Sometimes our work keeps us very secluded from the rest of the organization, from other business units. And we go about our work, we deliver what we're supposed to deliver, without really understanding what other people are doing, or the impact, or the effort. We work in what's generally referred to as a silo. And there are so many benefits to breaking those down and collaborating. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what a silo is, how it can hurt an organization, and what you can do about fixing that. Hold on. Welcome to Relationships at Work, the Employee Experience and Workplace Culture podcast. I'm Russel, always happy to be here to talk to you about this thing we have to do all the time, which is interact with human beings. And today's topic, really interesting for me. I've been in a lot of organizations where, and generally I fit into the communications role. Well, every role is a communications role, but more of where it's designated communications. And that can fit or not fit easily into the rest of the organization. So by that nature, it is siloed from other work that's being done, whether operational, whether strategic, whether mathematical, whether just a lot of different varieties of the type of work that we do. And that can really separate us. Have you ever had those moments where you learn what other people do in an organization? You're like, oh, that's why they're so busy. Oh, why are they doing that? Because we're doing the same damn thing. We should be talking more. Silos. And we talk about busting them. And we're going to get into the podcast where I don't know if that's the right verb to be using. But needless to say, we talk about breaking down these silos in our organizations, but then we just let them perpetuate. We ignore them. We let them happen. And we don't keep them top of mind as something that we have to make consistent efforts to stop from happening. And my amazing two guests today are going to help me and help you do a little better about that. Settle in, relax, and we'll learn together. Hold on. And on the show today, not one, but two guests on the podcast. We've got Keith Kmett and we've got Dr. Robyn Petree-Guzman. And here is why they're awesome. First up, Keith is the principal CX advisor for Medallia, where he works with clients and employees to improve customer experience programs. His background is in user experience and so much Spanish in his background. So much Spanish and journalism. Yes. And we have... yes, and we have C, I guess would be the most appropriate response, and Dr. and Dr. Robyn, who is the employee experience advisor for Medallia and a bit of a numbers nerd looking through all that research, all the research background for you. She is an IO psychology researcher. When I had to look up IO on Google, for sure I did. Scientist practitioners who have an expertise in the design, execution, and interpretation of research in psychology, and who apply their findings to help address human and organizational problems in the context of organized work. Damn, Robyn, how did I do? Does that make sense? That sound right?
That works. Yes. Good job.
Google wouldn't lie to me, so I just want to make absolutely sure we're going down the right path. Perfect. Thank you so much for being on the podcast to both of you.
Thanks, Russell.
Thanks for having us.
First question I ask every single person, and it can be good, it can be bad. I guess it really depends on how you want to start your day when you relive this memory, which is, and I'm going to start with you, Robyn. What's your best or worst employee experience?
I'll choose one of my best. This happened back in 2014. I had moved to the Midwest with cold winters for a job. And after 3 cold winters, I decided I need to move back to Texas where I belong. So this was before most people got to work remotely and all that stuff. But I went and asked my boss, hey, can I keep my job, but move back to Texas and work from home? And I had this whole speech plan to prove my point to him. But he immediately said, yes. And I said, wait, you don't even want to hear my pitch? He's like, no, you do a good job. And, if you belong there, I'm not going to stand in the way of your happiness. So sure, let's do that. And that was a great experience for me because it all worked out. I mean, if he had said no and forced me to stay there, I probably would have left the company, and looked for something else. But because he allowed me to stay and I loved my job, I ended up working there for many, many more years. I worked longer remotely than I did ever in the office. So it worked out wonderfully.
To be listened to and valued. It scares me that that's so novel, but I appreciate you sharing that.
I'll go with the worst just to,
Woo.
just to break the ice here.
Way to balance Robyn out. Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll balance Robyn out here. So, was in a new corporate role, had been working there for the first year, thought I was doing pretty well, felt pretty exciting, was, making a lot of good connections, doing a lot of great work. At this time, I was more focused on my UX role in my experience and with user experience. And that first year review had a new manager that just really felt threatened by me, apparently, or not sure what the deal was, but had what I felt was the worst review I've ever had, but at the end of the review was told I was being promoted. So I was like practically in tears over all the negative, but then given this promotion, and it was just one of those things where you kind of realized, oh wow, like, did I, you'd only been at the company a year. You're like, did I choose the wrong company, or did I just get a bad manager? Those types of things. And so I think perseverance is something that that experience taught me, because within, I changed teams shortly after that, and things went up and up. It is something where, just like you said, do you feel valued? Well, I felt valued by the company and by the teams I was working with, just not by my manager. But it made me really quickly realize I need to get off the team and make a change and move to a place where I could be.
Thanks for that. It really iterates the fact that a whole experience can be completely damaged by one individual in an organization. We talk about culture, we talk about teams, but there can be one person that ruins it for everybody and has way more influence on you individually than a great organization. I'm like, I don't care. Steve's an asshole. Like, it really just depends on your experience, your relationship with them. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
And thank you for leading us down a negative path to start, Keith. I really appreciate that. I had all these butterflies and fuzzies from Robyn, but no, you ruined it. Thanks, man.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if I would have started with all the positives, then we would never, we just never get to any negative things. But to your point, though, on the, that it's a telltale sign to leadership at the top level, that if you don't think you can influence culture, like, you're really, really wrong. Like, if you're that top leader, you're one of the biggest influences of culture just by the way you act and say things.
And it's something, it reminds me of something I like to say as well, is we use leadership way too often without putting context on it. Like, we talk about, here's our leader. Is it a shitty leader or a good leader? A leader doesn't define enough of what a person is. Just because you have a title, you automatically may have influence based on where you fit in hierarchy, but that doesn't mean you're a good leader just because you're in that position.
Precisely.
So speaking of positions, the topic for today is how you're positioned, I guess, within an organization, your team, you as an individual, because we're talking about silos. I guess the first thing we should mention is, what is a silo? Like, how would you define a silo within an organization?
I think of it as teams just working on their own and not collaborating enough. I've seen it happen, unfortunately, too many times where, and I don't think it's always intentional. I think sometimes we can be so heads down that we forget to stop, pause, think about what are the goals that we're trying to accomplish, what are our objectives, and how do they connect back to the overall mission of the company and what other folks are doing. So I don't always think it's an intentional thing, but it is that lack of communication and lack of collaboration.
I agree, Robyn. I think it's, I've heard it defined as business silos, and that could be at a country level, could be at a regional level, could be, but it eventually breaks down to people and teams, and that communication is a key part. As Russell mentioned, like my journalism background has taught me that over communicating what we're working on is never a bad thing. At my prior employer, we were a global company of 17,000, and trying to let everybody know that you're working on a problem for the customer and not have 6 other teams working on the same problem is a hard task to accomplish in a large company.
You kind of alluded to it, Robyn. What is some of the reasons how an organization can get siloed? Because though people don't do it intentionally, sometimes it's the nature of their work where it's just so involved. Or, for instance, and for me, I work in a communications group in more of an engineering organization. So even the nature of our work has siloed us, intentionally or unintentionally. Any other ways you can see how it would force that sort of bubble?
Yes, I think sometimes we do get focused on our department and we are subject matter experts in X and we do ABC. And then the other department are subject matter experts in something else and they do everything else, right? But we forget that there are individuals with their own strengths and they might have cross collaboration skills, right? So in my example, there was this company years ago, and they thought us researchers, the data analytics nerds, only could crunch numbers, and we had to sit at our desk and crunch the numbers and never actually communicate with the client, who we're crunching the numbers for. So it was very siloed as far as client has a request. The request goes to the team who interacts with the client. Then that team relays that information to the researcher and they do all that work, right? But you have to realize there's a lot that can get lost in translation in that request. And so I was one of those data nerds, and they realized, oh, we can put her in a room with a client and let her listen to them and talk with them. And there was one time I remember the plan that they had given me. I said, well, that's not the way to do it. I need to do something else. And actually the something else caused me more work, but I was happy to do it because I knew that that was really going to answer the question for the client. So that was an example of breaking down those silos. Let me come in and hear it straight from the client's mouth to get to the root of what kind of analysis do they really need. And then problem was solved and it was so much more efficient. So instead of saying, oh, okay, you only fit into this box, you must only do this type of job. Let's recognize individual strengths and see if we can, float them around into different departments and collaborate a little more.
Well, it's nailing that stereotypes actually might have a lot to do with silo creation. Yeah. Before we get into how to sort of change silos or why you'd want to, let's dive into the utopia. What's a world where silos don't exist? Is that the goal? Is that what we're trying to get to?
I think some of the Six Sigma folks would say, no, we need some of that operational efficiencies. We need some focus here. So like finding that balance, right? But I think a utopia for me is finding a way to flow information, and it's a communication strategy that lets every employee understand what's going on, how's this benefiting the customer, how's this benefiting the company, and like having that message be upfront and center. Kind of, I was talking to another friend yesterday about this, and he called it the morning news. Like, why couldn't it be my morning and evening news to understand like of these things? And I think when you hear that, people immediately jump to, well, what are you talking about? We do status reports, but status reports don't tell the story. So like my background in the storytelling, you've got to humanize the story. You can't just say we did this on this feature, we updated this, you need to communicate in a way that humans are going to understand the story, because they don't know exactly the project, but they need to understand the impact of the project. They're not asking for how the wrenches, how you're building the engine. They're just understanding, is it to run an Indy 500, or is it just to get, to the grocery store? Like what's the engine for?
How dare you talk about context, Keith, and how important context and storytelling is. So we live in a world where everybody's talking to everybody. Doesn't that kind of just add more work Robyn, you did mention that by busting silos, maybe that's one of the downsides is that, oh, now I have to do more work because more people want my time. More people want to talk to me. More people want to engage with me.
Well, and I think Keith hit on one of my favorite words, balance. There is a balance with it all. So in that example I gave, in that particular issue, I was doing more work in one sense than what they had originally asked me to do. But in the long run, I think I saved time and efficiency, because if I had delivered that first product that they wanted, it wouldn't have answered the question. I probably would have gone back and forth, and it would have caused more work in another way, right? But so I think it just really does come down to balance. So we don't want to over communicate. And so it's just in one ear, out the other. It's just getting the right kind of communication. And yeah, like we said before, you need the subject matter experts, making sure we got the right people in the right places. And maybe it's, the high level leaders communicating between the different departments to make sure, are we all still working on the same goal? Are we not duplicating efforts, that kind of thing? So it's just the right communication from the right people to the right people at the right time too. All those pieces of the puzzle have to fit together, right?
So you've mentioned, we've mentioned some benefits here. We've mentioned the fact that it might reduce duplication of work. It allows people to understand what other people are doing within the organization, to understand the value of what other people are doing. What are the other benefits of sort of breaking down those silos?
I've seen it benefit by not a duplication of product purchasing, like software purchasing, or procurement didn't really know that the two projects overlapped, and the company it sometimes has bought two solutions to solve the same problem. Then you get shelfware, or you get competing solutions, and then you say which solution's better. And both have their data to say, no, we evaluated this software to do this, and we evaluated to do this, and then you end up with both software packages, and you're paying for a contract. But I've seen where coming together, one thing we implemented, talking about balance with Robyn, is we implemented what I implemented in the past with my teams was a cross-functional quarterly look at what just portfolio of projects. What's the portfolio? What resources are you using? And just asking the question, what resources are you using to try to get that done? Is it IT? Is it marketing? What resources from a people perspective, and then what resources from a technology perspective? And we were able to actually start to map out our ecosystem of technology, and we were able to reduce the contracts. We were able to say, wow, we've got a lot of things that overlap. And we actually, in the first year as a group, eliminated $400,000 with spend on software, because we realized we could all be using the same tool. So that's an example of how a big benefit that hits the bottom line.
Saving money. Robyn, any more benefits you can think of for busting silos?
Absolutely. It's solving problems. I've seen this happen in many clients that I work with, but one in particular stands out. So the client had customer surveys, right? So folks would come and shop in their stores. You want that feedback. How was your experience? All that good stuff, right? And then that's managed by one team that looks at just that data and just those comments from the customers. And then they had another team who surveys those employees at those stores, right? And that was a completely separate team. Well, the problem was those two teams never spoke. But when we were able to convince them, let's kind of start meshing this data together, looking at customers and employee feedback at the same time, and having these two teams within the organization communicate about the findings, they were able to solve problems much faster. So customers were complaining about a particular issue that was happening. Well, sure enough, the employees, even though they were not ever directly asked about this particular issue in their survey, they brought it up in their comments, and they even had a solution for it. But the folks on the customer side of the experience, they weren't looking at those employee comments to find the solution. But when we busted the silos and said, hey, why don't y'all look at this integrated? It was like a light bulb went off, and then boom, problem was solved, because those frontline associates are the ones who are closest to the customers. Of course, they're going to have good ideas on solving those problems, right?
Absolutely. I like also, and you're sort of underlying this as well, is that there is a benefit of empathy too. Because if you understand what other people do in your organization, you have a better, I guess your empathy muscle gets a little bit more of a workout because you're like, oh, that's what they do. Oh, this is how they can help. This is how I can help them. Oh, no wonder they're busy all the time. It really encapsulates more of that understanding and compassion and empathy to get more of a heartfelt organization when we all know what everybody's doing, regardless of whether there even is overlap or not overlap. So, how do we start the process of busting silos? I feel so aggressive, and I want to touch on that in a minute too. But how do we sort of dismantle those silos within an organization?
In the spirit of doing my customer experience background, a lot of times it's finding common ground, but starting with the customer needs. Every business and a lot of companies I've worked with and seen, they'll have a laundry list of 72 different projects that they want to accomplish, or 172 projects and that might just be out of one business line, right? And so, finding using what I've seen work successfully is part of it's because of the industry I'm in, I think, is using customer feedback to help influence what to prioritize and what to focus on, and finding that common focus. Robyn mentioned, doing some of the strategic planning together rather than as a team. Yes, you want to do it as a team, but when you say, let's connect it to what everybody else is doing, well, everybody else has already done their own independent bucket. And sometimes the buckets don't stack well together. So you've got to really say, wait, maybe we should do the bigger, broader planning together first. What are the big priorities? And then say, what can we do in our controllable influence as a group, right, collectively? And where does it make sense to partner? And where does it make sense to do things separately? I've seen that happen really, really successfully, but using customer feedback and customer insight as a way of saying, how does this impact, asking the question, how does this impact our customer? Well, not just saying, how will this impact our business, but asking that additional question of how this impacts the customer. And then in addition, how will it impact our employees if we do this? Those three questions, I think, need to be asked in every strategic planning.
Yeah, I wasn't going to let you get away without mentioning the employees. That's my expertise.
Oh, yeah.
We can't always, we have to remember them, But yeah, I agree with everything Keith just said. It's really just connecting back to what is our mission, what is our goal, how can we achieve that collectively, while also maintaining, the specific groups that have their level of expertise in specific topics.
To though complement that employee part is, you might find that you actually need to focus on doing a really strong improvement of employee experience to deliver the best business outcome. Like, you might really need to change something that's causing friction or impeding progress for employees to deliver the best experience. So that could be a number one priority in your business, and you'll see exponential outcomes from that.
I love the idea of let's bust silos by understanding we're all one organization under vision, mission, and goals. But that's assuming your organization has a good vision, mission, and goals, when many organizations do not, or they become so convoluted and people don't see themselves in it, that it can, I guess it can reinstate those silos, because if people don't feel like they're connected to the organization, they're going to want to feel connected to something. So they're going to want to feel connected to their work and to their business unit. So not having that vision makes people go insular, because they're like, well, if you're not going to tell me which direction I'm going to go in, I'm going to go inside the organization to figure it out ourselves, whether that's a purpose statement, whatever that is for with the team. So an organization may not understand that they're actually contributing to siloing by not giving inspiration, direction, and all that stuff to the organization.
That's a great point.
I hear curiosity in what you're saying, Keith, and I want to bring that up and dig into that a bit. But I also want to ask, based on that vision mission problem, what is executives' role in this? Or is it the role of each individual silo going, I need to bust out and go make some friends?
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, I've experienced a lot of my experience has been in global companies. And so in the global organization, and a lot of times they say they're global, but they're more international. And what I mean by that is there's the headquarters, might be in the US, it might be outside of the US, but wherever the headquarters is the the core piece, and everybody else is kind of just, doing what they're supposed to do, whatever they're saying, but they actually don't feel like you just mentioned, they feel disconnected. They feel like they have to own their piece of the world or the country they're in or the region they're in. And so what I have seen the successful programs with starting at the CEO level, having that CEO recognize that and focus on, we are a team, focus that, making sure that the executive group sees themselves as a team rather than individuals responsible all for their own piece. Yeah, they're individuals and responsible for their own piece because that's what business school has taught you. But if you can't talk and communicate as a team, then it is the CEO's responsibility to break that down first. Make sure that they see each other as a team, that they treat each other like a team, and actually offer support for one another. Not just moral support, not just saying, that's too bad, your business is doing terrible, Russell. Which you should really get that up because it's hurting us overall. It's like, that's not how and that's not how a sports player, if you're playing football or soccer in the US and football everywhere else. If you're playing on a soccer team, one bad player, the whole team has to really rally around that person to make sure that, the ball doesn't get into our goal. So but that's where I've seen it work really well, is when the CEO says, stop, we're not acting like a team. Like, we're not even supporting one another. We're not even willing to say, hey, Robyn's having this problem, here's some resources, let me help you. Like, that wasn't happening. And I've seen it happen in a company where that wasn't happening, and the CEO said, stop, let's start helping each other.
Yeah. And you hit on something earlier, Russell, that made me think of the old idea of, like, walk in someone else's shoes for the day. Go sit and shadow someone to see really why is their job important, or why do I have to do something that I think is maybe menial or tedious or something. But when you explain the why behind it or how it impacts, this other department, I can think of something like billable hours, time cards. Like, why is it so important to get your time cards in? Well, because that impacts accounting, and we're going to make their lives difficult if we don't get these things in time, right? Or our expense reports, little things like that might seem like admin tasks that take up time, but it does impact someone else's job. So having that empathy, understanding the why, not just go do this, but here's why I'm asking you to do this. Here's how it impacts everything else, the domino effect.
And we're talking questions. Like, a lot of this has been ask questions. Put yourself in their shoes. Get curious. Yep. How do you go about that? Is there a list of questions? Is it just being available? What is it?
I think there's a lot of different attributes that somebody can take. But to your point, like, and what Robyn and I both talk about a lot, we've seen, a lot of articles saying, like, empathy is the new leadership. To be a great leader, you're going to have to be able to show empathy. And, but it's really hard for me to gauge in any level how empathetic Russell feels about an employee, or how empathetic Robyn feels. Like, you have to witness a lot of things in order to see that empathy. Well, I can't be your shadow every day. So what are other ways of trying to help people become more empathetic? And what I have found is curiosity is a key here. That curiosity is something that we can use to say, look, Russell, I can't make you feel or be empathetic for somebody, but I can encourage you to ask them questions. And here are some questions you could ask. Like, just check in. Like, how are they doing? What are they needing in their day-to-day as an employee? Like, what's getting in their way of either helping a customer, or what's stopping them, right? Ironically, Agile does a lot of this in their stand-ups from an IT world, like and Agile now has come more into the business world, right? But I see a lot of Scrum teams that still will do their stand-ups, but they've left out one question in the methodology. And that question is who needs help? They all just give a status report, but they never ask each other anymore, well, who needs help? Or can I help you with that? They're just listening for the status reports, and then the it's over. And it's like, hey, the whole point of the Agile manifesto, and this could be applied to business, is to listen to the status reports, but then be curious enough to say, who needs help? Like, don't just watch them go down with the ship, and just ask the question. But I've seen that lost even in Agile methodology with Scrum teams.
Yeah, and what I've observed with probably the best leaders that I've seen in the workplace are they end meetings with, what can I do to support you, or what can I do to help you? That is the best way for managers to help their teams and to increase productivity. So those that are really just looking to see, what else can I do to make your day better, to make your job easier? What obstacles are in the way that I can help remove?
Where does culture fit into all this? It might be a culture of curiosity. It might not. You might be going against the grain by even asking questions, because some hierarchical organizations, you have to get approval to even talk to certain people, which is such bullshit. Right. So culture really can be a hindrance and a help. How have you seen that?
Outside of this country, so I've worked in Latin America. I worked in Chile, Mexico, Brazil, where culture is more hierarchical than ever. To even attempt to go to lunch with a senior leader is you have to get approvals, and you have to make sure your leader knows that you're talking to this other leader, and all these different steps to be able to talk to them. And then they'll get feedback on what kind. If you ask them hard questions that stump them, they would give you your leader feedback that you're asking them hard questions, and it's like, why are they asking me these questions? And they would just immediately go into that kind of defensive mode. So I witnessed this as a foreigner living abroad, going into a new culture, asking all these questions. Now, I think because I was a foreigner, I got a pass because I didn't know all the cultural norms. So I got to break some silos just by being ignorant to the culture. But once I learned the culture, it became, and they expected me to understand that part of the culture. It became one of these things where I just started wearing with a badge of honor that I'm going to ask questions. I was just determined to say the culture we need to have at work is of curiosity. Like, it just needs to be, let me ask questions. And I got to use my journalism background as an excuse. I'm like, I can't help it. I'm a journalism major. I'm not an engineer. I'm going to just ask a lot of questions. And, I will listen with all the intent, but let me ask my question, and I'll listen with all intent to your answer. And I think also showing that you're going to listen, you're not judging, you're not asking to judge, you're asking to just understand and listen, is a key piece of it.
Oh, that's perfect. Listening is a big factor, because, you might come in and see a lot of things wrong and you want change. But I've seen that really fail for some folks, because you first do need to understand, why is this culture the way it is? Even if you don't like it right away, maybe pause, observe, listen to the why behind it, and then respectfully push those boundaries and start asking, well, what if we did it this way? What if we change some processes here and there? But at least understand the why behind it before, you go in and just start, I guess, busting too soon. Busting silos is our topic. So I'm going to keep busting things, right?
Right. If you get a response of why you're asking me this question, then they think you have a motive that's probably not your motive, but they've already put that mental block, that mental silo now in. And so you've got to figure out a way to tear it down. So your curiosity won't win them over. It'll just build a bigger wall. So finding the right way to approach it. Yeah, Robyn, is a key piece, and just being open to listening. One of the best leaders that I ever witnessed this would always lay down with just the utmost humility his ignorance on the table. I've seen him do it in front of, like, on the board, in front of executives. It's just like, I am no expert at this. I really don't have these answers. Just really lay it out there. And he's like, I just want to ask this question and let's have a discussion. And he's like, because I'm just not a smart person. I don't know, but here it is. And he would lay it out. And every time he did that, like, you saw the whole room, all the walls just drop, because he was just so humble about saying, I don't know. I really don't know. But here's the question I can ask. And maybe it's the wrong question, he would say. Maybe it's even the wrong question. But every time he did that, the demeanor of the whole room would change, and he could just work the room, and then he could really ask the questions he wanted.
Oh, that's great. And then I'm sure the group felt safe to ask their own questions because of that. And then everyone learned.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. A lot more people.
Yep.
Exactly.
I love the fact that you're talking about curiosity and humility being such a driver for change. But I've also been in rooms where we're talking about busting silos, and I'll never forget this. We were doing a workshop about it, and there was an IT guy. I don't want to pick on IT, but IT was off in the corner, and I literally heard him mumble, but I like my silo. Because he feels, it was a he, felt that he could be more productive by being heads down, focused on my work, and not having to worry about anybody else's work. So how do you approach those people that are much happier just within their shiny cone of silence?
I get it. Change is hard. when we are heads down and we're in our groove, I get it. It is hard to get that change initiated. So how do you do it? I think it is, again, I'm going to go back to the why. Let's just not say this is what we're doing, but here's why we're doing it. And here's what I think we're going to see when we break down the silos and communicate a little bit more, and put people, like I said before, play up people's strengths. In fact, I've done a lot of research on drivers of engagement over the years, and using people's strengths is one of the key drivers of them being engaged in their job. So to that IT person, maybe don't push him past his boundaries where it's so uncomfortable, but nudge him, but still use his strengths in certain ways, right? But it's just explaining the why behind the change.
I actually know I had this conversation with somebody with IT. Again, my background is so diverse. I was actually a developer once, so I kind of can speak the lingo as well. And I did have somebody, a leader, kind of say, I just want to go do my own thing, just focus on these. And the way I challenged that response was, one, we had a culture that was, every leader wants to be seen as a strategic leader so that they could be part of the strategy and be in the room when that happens. And so I just said to this person that had said, I don't care about this. I just want to do my own thing. And I was like, okay, well, I'm like, from a strategy perspective, how will you know if you're working on the right things, if you're not in the loop on these things? How will you know that the orders you're being given actually are the ones you should be prioritizing and working on? And I said, so if you want to be strategic about it, like let's mitigate the risk of you potentially taking on work that you shouldn't be doing. And, when you have it, good, go. But just check your side mirrors every now and then. I always use car analogies. It's like, check your rear view mirror, check your side mirrors, and make sure that you're not barreling down the road and, you're actually going down the wrong way, or, what's going on. But that's all we're asking you to do. And again, my approach was check in, finding the right cadence to have that. let them go for 3 months and then bring them back and then go for 3 months. But then eventually that person that I mentioned that I worked with eventually turned into a monthly check-in. Not because of me asking, they started asking because they started seeing the value of the quarterly check-ins. So like you said, nudge them, Robyn, but you do have to give sometimes a good push.
Well, I use the term busting silos because that's the vernacular people use when it comes to what we're talking about. But that's not what we're talking about at all. We're talking about, let's look over our silo, look over and see what they're working on. Personalize it, understand them before like, that's why I was like, busting silos feels so aggressive, because as a lot of research dictates, the more aggressive you are to other people's work, stances, opinions, they'll just dig in their heels even more and go, I'm just going to focus on what I'm going to focus on. I don't care about you. So by making it about them and not about you, and sort of nudging the silo or tapping on the silo to sort of remove it, is a lot more beneficial. And Keith, I love that we talk about curiosity, but what you've just done is made them curious. It's not just about being curious yourself, it's about inspiring others to be curious about you too. So it sort of connects those dots together. I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think the quarterly in-person meetings I had with free lunches also helped. Like the free lunch did help, but it actually let us build those.
Bribery always works, man. Free lunch.
I know, right? Like,
especially as a former journalist, of course you'll show up.
Exactly. You volunteer at school, anywhere, you bring food, you bring snacks. I've been late at meetings, thrown out candy on the table and said, I'm late. And nobody said anything. They just picked up candy and ate.
So we're miracle workers. We've taken an organization and we've removed, I'm trying to little less aggressive language, those silos. What's the downside of this? I remember talking to both of you pre this show, and employee recognition came up a little bit of, if we're all in this together, but people like to be recognized differently for the hard work that they do. So I can see that being, but wait a second, Jimmy over there didn't do as much work as I did, but now we're all part of one team, so we all get recognized as a team. So I can see it impacting people personally that way. Any words on that, or other downsides of silo busting?
That's what we started to see. Yeah, we started to see people that wanted more of that credit recognition. Say that, sure, I'm part of the team. Sure, the team got recognized, but me individually, either through compensation or other accolades, they didn't feel that they got enough credit for their efforts, or they would feel that, they would start to get animosity of, this leader took credit for us, didn't even mention us, what the heck. And this is where for me, the next phase of things was coaching people how to communicate. It kind of goes back to our communication, coaching leaders to say that, it's going to be really vital to the team that help pull, like the cross-functional teams that help make this happen. If you do not mention them all, you will find yourself on an island and they will move on without you. So meaning, I kind of threatened them and saying, you're going to create your own silo, but in a bad way, because the whole, what's going to happen is the new pipeline of getting work is going to exclude you out because you're not being inclusive. And so like, I was trying to coach leaders around that to help that, but that's exactly the culture. You can mitigate that risk through better communication and coaching on that. And in my opinion, Robyn, I'm not sure from your experience.
It's going back to understanding the individuals. How do they like recognition? Some don't want a whole bunch of attention. Some, maybe it's not a large announcement in front of the whole company, but it's just within that team, recognizing the individual efforts. So it's a balance, right? Of recognizing the team's efforts, but then finding what individual efforts went into that and making sure in one way or another, whatever they're comfortable with, that they are recognized for their efforts.
That's a good point. Know the people you're working with.
Any other downsides to removing silos and being more of a flat organization?
Sometimes I've seen this happen. Sometimes you think these two projects should be working together, and it doesn't work out, and you know that's a downside, because it can look like like an utter failure. But for me, it's always just been a key learning. It's like, okay, it's not that these two teams couldn't work together. This was the wrong thing to connect them on.
And I would just say to stop, evaluate. Was this the right path? Reiterate if we need to change course. Don't just say, well, we committed to doing it this way, we have to do it. No, maybe not. Maybe not. Like Keith said,
that's a good point.
Maybe it's not the right for these two groups to be together. Maybe we keep the silos for this particular project or whatever it is. So I would just say constantly evaluate, and you don't have to stick to something just because you said we're going to go down this path. You might be able to change course and have a better product.
Yeah, because you could get disengaged. You can get then disengaged employees, and then people like churn, and people start leaving just because one project went wrong. And it's like, wait a second, did we have to commit to that? No.
Well, I'm going to finish the episode with the big question I ask every episode, which is, and I'll start with you, Dr. Robyn. What is one simple thing people can do, one simple action? What's one simple action people can do right now to improve their relationships at work?
I'm going to stick to my positivity theme and say, think positively. And what I mean by that is when you interact with people throughout your day, whatever their intention was, try and assume it was a positive intention. I'm going to go back to my old Psychology 101 book from when I was an instructor. It said attribution bias, the example of if you're driving in traffic and someone cuts you off, a lot of people's immediate response is, oh, that person's an idiot. There's something about their character, right? But change your mind and say, oh, maybe they have an emergency and maybe they didn't mean to do this to me, right? So do that throughout your workday too. If someone, is short with you or says something to offend you, oh, well, maybe they're just having a really bad day, or maybe, and just try it for one day and see how you feel at the end of that day compared to, all these other things that you might normally go throughout your day and like assuming the worst of people. So just think positively.
Keith, bring it home. What is one simple action people can do right now to improve their relationships at work?
I'll go to a page out of my own playbook. I'm a mixologist of people. I would challenge listeners to pick 2 to 3 different people that so you can be this hub. So pick 2 or 3 people that from different departments, and invite everybody to like either a Zoom coffee or an actual coffee, whatever you can do, and just bring 3 to 4, 2 or 3, 4 people, random people together, and just make introductions amongst them. And start them by saying, hey, did you know, like if some common themes, hey, did you know Robyn does this or has this hobby, or, but make those connections. At a company, my prior company, the company was so large, I started doing a mixology of people. It got up to about sometimes 20 or 30 people at a wine mixer. But what it did was I started bringing HR people together. And the best moment I ever saw in doing this challenge was having a VP talk to a call center operator, and they didn't know, because the one rule was don't share titles. So it was, you can't say what your title was, but they didn't know each other, and they talked and they had a great conversation. And then later looked up each other at work, who was that, and realized, wow. And that VP said, I need to talk to more people in the call center now. And I was like, yeah, you do, because they're really good people. And so I would just challenge everybody to invite, be a connector, and make a simple gesture, invite 2 random people that that wouldn't ever work together, and see if there's a connection, see if there's a spark.
Realize that you work with people, not titles. I absolutely love that, Keith. So that'll do it for this episode. Thank you very much to Keith Kmett and Dr. Robyn Petree-Guzman. Thank you so much both for being here today.
Thanks, Russell.
We're tipping over silos. We're not busting them. We are nudging silos. There you go. I'm trying to make my language better. Take care.